Oh, hello there. Yes, well, I think this week's going to be a bit of a struggle. I really don't feel up to, well, pretty much anything, really. Still, never mind. I guess that's neoliberalism dragging me down into the mire. No, that can't be right. Such things don't exist, of course. Yes, speaking of things not realistically existing or existing in people's heads, this weekend we had a call from 130 concerned citizens for a deep, penetrating government inquiry, yes, one of those ones, into the gender ideological movement thing, what is capturing our kids and making everything rubbish, yes, led by James Esses. You may recall James, who, yes, is still working towards his goal of, eventually, at some stage, presumably I'm hoping before I die, to be quite honest, he can have his court case, and he was the person behind the Declaration of Biological Reality, which still hasn't managed to reach 25,000 people because there aren't that number of bigots in the country. But you can get 130 of them to write to the Daily Telegraph, which will splash it all over everywhere. So it's worthwhile sort of just going into it. It demands an inquiry, a government inquiry, a bit like Cass. Yes, we'll come back to government inquiries in a little bit. Anyway, it's signed by the great and the good. There's the usual MPs you might expect, like Miriam Gates and Danny Kruger, and it's got Liz Truss on board because nothing says intellectual rigour like having Liz Truss on board. There's all the usual kind of suspects that you might expect to be there, like, Kathleen Stocks. Who else have we got? There's Glinner and a variety of people from you've never heard of who are doctors, if you like. There's a few detransitioners there, and various other people like James Dreyfus, actor. Not really quite sure what that adds to it, but there we go. And of course Peter Whittle from the New Culture Forum, which again just adds intellectual rigour to the whole exercise. Yes. So what do we end up with this? Well, we end up with a move by the powers that be, because it is the powers that be, isn't it, for yet another government inquiry where we know what the answer will be. Because if we look at the history of government set-up inquiries, they do tend to come up with the conclusion that the government wants them to. And I will point people to the 2021 inquiry into racism in the UK, in particular looking at institutional racism. Yes, Commission for Racial Equality. Now, that was set up to look at, basically, if there was such a thing as institutional racism. And very sensibly, the government put a whole bunch of people on it that don't believe in institutional racism, and drum roll, they discovered that there was no such thing as institutional racism, which is very, very, very good if you think about it, because it's constantly being cited, especially on GB News, by their black public school guys who insist that there is no such thing as racism. It's just one or two bad apples. There's no such thing as institutional racism, despite the fact that almost every single inquiry since the Second World War into, for example, policing has basically come up with the belief that there is institutional racism, but they're all wrong. There is no such thing as this overarching scheme to make sure that black people and others are shut out from society. Which brings us to James Esses et al. And the Daily Telegraph, because isn't it odd that whilst there is no such thing as institutional racism, there is definitely such a thing as an institutional plot to sterilise and mutilate children? Definitely. Isn't there? Yeah? Liz Truss won't believe in institutional racism, but she will believe that she was brought down by the institutions, the blob, the elites, whichever way you want to put it, yeah? Because, after all, that's real, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? Yes, it's not a political game that certain spotty, youthful commentators will drag out of the mud, is it? No, that wouldn't make any sense. So anyway, I very much look forward. I think we really, really, really must have an independent inquiry, because that way I can definitely think to myself about all the bad things that I'm definitely doing already. Yes, that'll force me not to treat my students that I work with a level of dignity and respect that they really basically deserve. No, I mustn't do that. Anyway, yeah, I just find it astounding that these people can exist in a world where made-up elites control everything, and at the same time, actual elites don't. Astounding. Anyway, do have a lovely Monday if you can do. I'm going to struggle through the day. Enjoy.